panel, Gladys, I'd like to start with you because you worked in direct social impact before, and now you're working in a corporate sector that's indirect social impact, correct?
Yes.
And so I'd like to start with you and say, like, what was your journey in, you know, deciding from the very beginning that you wanted to not just work for a living, but work for meaning? And how did you get to where you are today? And I don't want to call you a grandmother in this space, but your journey's certainly been a lot longer than
I
some
am
of us.
a grandmother. I have 20 years in technology. It is. But before I answer your question, I also know that you do something great. Mm-hmm. And even though you're chairing the panel, I think we should hear from her about e-Limu, isn't it?
Okay.
Where you work. Because these girls need to hear that you're also doing something great.
Sure. I always feel when I'm moderating I should temper my time. So at e-Limu, we call it e-Limu, not e-Limu. What we do is we take the Kenyan curriculum for KCPEs and we load it up on tablets. Grace, if you can just hold that tablet up in the air. And we add animations and videos and music and songs. And the whole point is that as children are reading the textbooks, that they're actually having a little bit of fun and learning, and we've seen that their exam scores get better and they know more about the world and care more about the world. So that's what we do at e-Limu. So that is very directly social impact work. But yeah, we'll speak about for-profit, not profit, but tell us about your journey.
Thank you for sharing your story, because I always find it inspiring. And I hope during this panel, the audience will actually look for things that we say that actually inspire you, because that's why we are saying what we say. A very interesting journey I've had, and because it's 20 years, I'll try and put it in 2 minutes, which is really a short time. To begin with, 1990 is the year I joined university. How many were born? None in this room, huh? Okay. Kind of few. And believe you me, computing was something. I remember thinking our physics teacher was kind of mad when he used to say that people will be walking on the streets talking to one another. We actually declared. That's when I dropped physics. So my journey just began all the way from high school, asking myself, what do I want to be? And what I like about e-Limu, I've corrected myself, is bringing that technology space to the classroom, which I did not have. So my journey was I want to get a school. I want to go to a school and build spaces that can bring about computer knowledge. I happen to come from a family that has a little bit of exposure to computers in the early 90s. So I wanted to build a school. So I started off by opening a school for computers while still in campus. And I like what AkiraChix is doing, because that's the journey. But you had no financial backing and things like that were going off. So I said, why don't I join the education sector and teach about technology? And luckily enough, there were enough colleges coming up in town, and they did not know what they wanted to teach. They did not have teachers. So there I was running between classes and teaching DOS. Do you know what DOS is? And teaching DOS, and in those days, earning 6,000 shillings a month was a lot of money. A lot of money. I could afford a lot of things, like a boombox that people in campus could not afford. And we were paid to go to university. So I used my university money to buy my first P1 computer. Wow. Laughing at you? Yes. Then I felt the space of just being an entrepreneur and not having resources to build it was not going to work for me. So I looked for a profit-making sector where I could actually grow. 6 years later, I decided I think I should be volunteering. And one of the areas I volunteered was at Starehe Boys Center. They were then setting up the Computer for Schools channel. And then I was doing development for teacher curriculum. e-Limu comes in again, teacher curriculum and content. So I did that for about 2 years. While I was volunteering, are the people in t-shirts here? While I was volunteering, those guys in t-shirts volunteering for AkiraChix, while I was volunteering for 6 months, 3 days a week, I was then picked by an international NGO called Computer Aid International, while I was volunteering, I also compared that. Because sometimes when you're volunteering, you're asking yourself, what am I actually doing? So that was my journey into the social sector. ICT for development was really challenging. I'm giving people free computers. Why aren't they wanting to use them? Yeah. The fear of technology and just understanding that space. So we grew Computerite as a briefcase office into an African hub serving 20 African countries with a team of 7. And my journey in Computerite was really a journey of overcoming fears. And my greatest fear was traveling. Flying was like, how do I get out of space? If the aeroplane gets a puncture, just that thought used to make me feel, why am I doing this job? And I flew every month for 8 years. So the journey of just overcoming your fear, just imagine what I would have missed. The joy of bringing technology across the world. And then I decided, now enough of volunteering and giving people good changes. I want to make some money. Mobile banking, mobile financial services, the space I am in, and yes, I am making some good money.
Good. A round of applause for that. So, Monica, when we think of making money, and so e-Limu is an example of a social enterprise. And that's an organization where we're a for-profit organization. We decided very early on, let's not be a charity, let's not be an NGO, but we want to focus on social impact. We're not making tablets for, rich students in suburban Nairobi. We're making tablets for Kenyans who cannot afford tablets. So, Monica, there's a huge challenge there in terms of social impact, that a lot of technology that we build for change, it's a real challenge when there's no infrastructure on the ground. When we go to a school and, we started e-Limu with an app, and they said, well, we don't have any tablets. And we said, okay, here's a tablet. And they said, we don't have electricity. And we said, well, here's a solar panel. And they said, we don't have connectivity. And then we gave them connectivity, and they said, we don't have any security, the tablets will get stolen. So there are so many challenges in terms of technology for change. And tell us about some of the things that you've seen in your journey, in your career path.
Okay, in terms of challenges when it comes to the use of tech, from my experience and from the work that you do at Making All Voices Count, the challenges are detected by different circumstances, and most of them are either political, they are geographical, based on where you're operating. But then for me, what has always helped overcome those challenges is the fact that I've realized as human beings, as citizens of the world, we have similar social problems. So you realize, like in Liberia, for example, they will face a challenge of health, they'll face corruption issues, but when you come back home in Nairobi, it's the same kind of scenario that you will face. So that means that we have tools, we have technology. Our work is to try to make sure that we have the appropriate tools, because then that can overcome the social, the political, the geographical challenges. And what has been most useful, for example, is the power of inclusiveness when it comes to designing technology for a given context. If you're going to deploy, for example, a tool, it is very important that you get to speak to the locals on the ground. You get to have for example, the development team, the designers, do an actual test on the ground to see what works. And through such forums, you're able to hear from the people, you're able to hear from the government, their fears. Because sometimes, for example, you will go and introduce, for example, an e-learning tool, and maybe the opposition is not even from the people who are meant to use the tool. It's not even from the citizens. It's actually from the authorities in that given particular area. So if you get to have a practical presence to do a practical deployment, you're able to tap into the voices of everyone else who's operating in the ground. You're then able to work around such kind of challenges. So for me, a key, important factor to consider is to try and have as much people interact with your tool. Let it be owned by the people, because then if you keep it to yourself, then it reduces the chance of succeeding. I mean, let the tool go out there, let it be criticized, let people interact with it, and that way you're able to get feedback.
And just going off what Juliana said about iterations, yes. I remember early on my co-founder, Marie, with e-Limu, it was like, no, it's not ready yet, it's not ready yet. And a quote that I remember is, software is never released. It escapes bleeding. So, you need to put it out there. And you've just said that. So do you have any example of, software that was really unrefined to begin with, and its path in getting better and better, and how brave you have to be to put something out there that isn't working, that isn't the best, it isn't what you envisioned it should be?
I'm going to give an example of a project that we are currently running in Liberia. It's called This Is My Backyard. It's actually a mobile app that you can use to report issues of corruption, issues of land issues, land inheritance, which is quite sensitive in Liberia. So the team set out to release a tool, but then a lot of there wasn't much thought that was put into the security aspect of deploying the tool. And the team realized when they were already in the field that this is actually not going to work. The kind of messages that are coming in, we're able to tell who sent it. Everyone who's accessing the platform can actually see this was sent by Monica. They can sort of trace it back. So they didn't have the right security measures put in place. So what the immediate sort of reaction to that was to try, instead of pulling out the tool at that instantly, since it was already released into the villages, they decided to use it for a different cause. And coincidentally, that's when the Ebola crisis broke out. So instead, they said, since for Ebola, you want to have as much information as you can about the kind of information that's coming in. So we set out to have the tool now being used to report issues of Ebola, but then work on how to ensure that if you're going to use a tool to report land issues and report ministers and report corruption issues, so we are still going to work on the corruption aspect and the security aspect from the background. So the community is actually using the tool to report on health issues, but there's an invisible power that the tool was actually meant to report issues of lands and inheritance.
Okay. Yes. Now we're at, this panel is called Technology for Change, and this is Women in Technology. And Gladys is someone who started very early in technology when not many women were becoming engineers, when many women were learning DOS. What do you think? Like, what is the importance of the participation of women in technology? And when we think of companies like Google, Yahoo, Facebook, they're all facing a really serious problem in their boardrooms, on their development floors. They don't have enough women. And they're coming under the spotlight for that. They're getting a lot of negative press for that. And they realize, it's not enough to have a quota, not a bit like a political quota. It's not okay to say, okay, now we want 30% or 50% women to fill these spots. Because they're simply not there. We need to start when they're your age, when they're at high school. That's why they're so keen on things like high school programs and saying, hey, when you grow up, please come and work for organizations like us. There's such a scarcity and need for women. And what do you feel? What do you think about the participation of women and why it's important for women to be involved in technology at this stage?
That's a very loaded question. A lot has been said about the importance of having women. We're 50% of the population, 55, I think, in Kenya. And if you're not there speaking about the issues that affect women, I like the lean-in book by this lady from Facebook. Yes, if you're not stepping up to the table and speaking, who will speak for you? I'm actually looking for a vehicle manufacturer who will build a space for a handbag next to the car. Honestly, where do you keep your handbag?
Yeah.
But there's a space for a bottle and a cigarette lighter. Are you hearing this? So that's it. Because we are consuming things built by men, we shall continue to suffer in not having a place for keeping the baby chair. Honestly, some of these cars, my handbag is the most abused item in my car. You want to put it in the back seat, somebody will. So really, the space, the time for talking about is it important, is there a place for women in the technology space is over. And I wish mentorship can change from mentorship to tormentorship. Because we have to stop begging these girls to fit into the space. It's totally frustrating. In the 90s, I couldn't even get a bank loan. Are you married? Where's your father? Do you have a son? You can't get, you couldn't get that there. You have it now. You even have a spaces in 30% of your board must be women. You have it. Why are we pleading anymore? I think you need each and everybody in this room. I have a tormentor. You need to get a tormentor who, yes, you've been mentored, you've decided what your path is, so that when you decide that path, no matter how you feel, you must wake up, show up, dress up, and position yourself to take those seats. Because you know what? We will still continue to having cars without handbag seats. Because the men are the ones sitting in the decision place. And it's not that they've not given you the space, they have. So rise up to the space. I am a mother of boys and I get into a lot of problems because I always mentor girls. Because there's a lot of opportunities for you guys, but you're not taking it up. The companies that are being put on the spotlight, they're showing their policies. They're showing their education programs. They're saying we take our women even for outreaches and things like that. What more do you want us to do? So really, girls, let's rise up and take those spaces because they're there for us. Tell your neighbor you need a tormentor. Because the spaces are there for you to fill, and you just have to wake up and pick them.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, I sit and I work in the AkiraChix office a lot, and I'm always hearing the instructors of the classes saying, come on, like, do any of you have an answer? There are no wrong answers, raise your hand. And this book by Sheryl Sandberg, Lean In, it's about that. It's about not thinking that, well, someone else must know a better answer than me. And they did a small experiment. They took a little toy to a school, and everyone played with it, and they had fun, and the boys and the girls. And then they asked everyone, would you be interested in building things like this? And all the girls said, no, but maybe that boy or maybe this other person, you can ask them. Like, none of the girls really felt that they had what it takes to do it. And it's such a cliched thing to say, but I really think that, you know, to find that voice inside you that knows that you don't always have the answers, that you don't always know the best thing, but still put your hand up, still dress up, still show up, still lean in, still build something, and still serve someone. Monica, you know, were you always an assertive type of person, or did that personality of yours grow?
This, I think, speaks so much to me because I'm going to talk about one of the challenges that I had as I was, you know, from school and transitioning. Is the fact that I am an introvert. Yes, I'm still an introvert. And I've always been, even through high school, I was a kind of student who was, I'm the #1 student, but then I never speak in class. And everyone is wondering, you never speak in class, but then when the results are out, you know, you score. But then it was more of a personality issue. But then through the years, I've learned the power of being assertive because I met a lady some years back and she told me, you cannot afford to go underground. You cannot afford to sit down and let everyone else speak just because you think what you're about to speak is not the right answer for that context. And why I would challenge you to get out of that comfort box, because I think why I would really challenge you to get out of that comfort zone is that when you speak out, you build relationships. And what I have learned through the power of speaking out is that it opens you up to other people learning what you know, other people being able to tap into, for example, how they can mentor you, how they can involve you in an activity or not. So by speaking up, by raising up your ideas, by even if you fail, even if you succeed, it opens up a world of relationships for you. And that's really important in this journey. Human relationships are very key. How you relate with your colleagues, how you relate with your peers. So I'd really encourage you not to just sit down and hold on to your thoughts, but learn to speak them out. And I think it's also important that all of you are also mentors. There are also girls younger than you, less privileged than you, who have less exposure than you. Just by being at this conference, you're more exposed than 99% of the girls in Kenya. So acknowledge that. And know that, when we open textbooks, and I, look at textbooks all the time, and every time there's a picture of someone fetching water or someone cleaning a compound, it's a woman. When there's someone driving a tractor or using a computer, it's a man. So these are the messages we're sending to those 99% of girls, and they need to see you. They need to see girls like you standing up, leaning out,
leaning in and shining and, you know, really raising your hand and speaking up. Okay?
You first and then you can take your Chinese.